Alright, so this is a video overview of what I did for the lighting, shading, and rendering for the alphabet rig project animation, right? So I'm gonna play it here, and then one more time, and then one more time, and then one more time. So yeah, I'm gonna go over what I did. I'm not gonna go through the process because that'll just take a long time and I'm tired, right? But I will show the key points of what I did and how I got to this point in time, which again is basically the near the same process that I've shown for the other projects in the lighting and rendering, and it's just pretty much the same thing, just with colors and or different colors. Yeah, so I'm gonna go talk about that. I'm gonna move this out of the way. Alright, so this is what I have. Okay, and what I have here is where I imported each rig, right? I imported each rig and I animated it. Alright, and I talked about how to properly import rigs before in another tutorial, which I sent out the link and through email. Anyway, going back to this, first I have here the massive cylindrical infinity wall, right, that everyone is aware of. And then I turn on backface culling so that the wall doesn't block my line of sight, right? And in terms of the camera, right, all I did was, you know, panels, perspective, new, right? And the new camera that was made, I named it this, animated render cam, which is right here. Right now you don't see it because I hid it. Right, there it is. Alright, the camera has some animation, right, to show more impact when the letters land, right? Boom. See, camera shake. Boom. Later on, I'm gonna put sound effects, but that's later. Anyway, so I made it real simple. All I did was keep the camera looking straight forward, right? You'll see that there's no translate X, which is my left to right movement, right? You'll see that there's no rotation up and down. There's no rotation. Let me see. Right. There's no rotation like left to right or side to side. All right. There's only rotation on the X because of you know, to give a bit of a tilt looking up. That's all there is. Rotate Z and Y, nothing at all. Not even throughout the animation. Perfectly clean rotation values. And all I have is translate Y up and down for some animation. That's all I have. Feel free to have a different camera angle, right? But what I'm saying is I just kept it simple as it gets while maintaining a decent composition, right? When I say decent composition, meaning it's centered, right? It's centered. I have enough space on the lower end. I have way more than enough space on the higher end ceiling, floor versus ceiling, left and right. There's no cropping or anything like that. All the motion, right, is within means visually. There's no erratic camera movement where there's cropping for important parts happening. You know, it's just steady and balanced. All right, so what else did I do? Well, let's first talk about the shading, right? I'm gonna click on the hyper shade. I named them, right? Blue, alphabet, green, alphabet, yellow, put shader, right? And the shading for the alphabets. If you do this, it'll work out fine, and especially it will work out fine if and when you apply the lens effect to get that light bloom. Because if your lights are too bright and in conjunction with your shaders having the specular weight too strong, right? It'll blow out the scene. So there's a fine balance, but the end result is you get something super nice. Little highlights here, just enough to be interesting. A little bit over here too, just subtle enough. Better to have it than not. Anyway, so the shader base weight is 1. All right, color, I just gave some pastel like colors, right? All of this is default. Specular weight, I drop it to 0.7. I keep the color white. Roughness at 0.5. The roughness will make a nice fuzzy soft glint when the lighting interacts with the shader. It'll create that nice soft fuzziness to it. See, here and here, and like here and here and here, right here and over here. So 0.7 and 0.5. Very, very, very simple. I did not mess with anything else. This here, right, same thing, same values, and a different color, same values. Keep it super simple, and you'll get a, you know, really nice color. I think this is super nice. You know, the colors and the lighting, overall lighting and everything, even though I made it, so regardless, I still think it's very much presentable. It reminds me of something out of Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network or something, you know. Anyway, now the next important thing is the wall shader, right? The wall shader, I did not give it a white color because the lens effect, it'll blow out the scene. Like these highlights over here, it just blew it out. Because the white, having a white color for the base, it just draws in the lens effect light bloom, lens effect, the bloom effect. It makes it just blow out of control, even with the fine tuning if it's pure white. So that's why I just gave it some color. I also highly recommend you give it a color other than white to prevent that light bloom from completely blowing out the scene. Yeah. The other thing too is that the wall shader, right? This is really important. Even now, I already know some students gonna just ignore it and make issues with the render, create issues with the render. But please pay attention to this. So the base weight is at 1 for the wall shader, right? The diffuse roughness, I dropped that down. It kind of weakens the color, and it weakens the color and the overall strength of the shader color, right, and the look of it. Reason why I dropped this down, right, the reason why is that because of the lens effect, to get that nice light bloom right here, because this right here was blowing out, Even with the color change from white to a different color. That's why I kind of dropped this down, the diffuse roughness, to make it weaker, so the lens effect wouldn't blow out. On top of the lens effect tuning that I did. Then, most importantly, I dropped the specular shininess. The floor, do not make the floor shiny. It's cheesy, and it just makes it look like 1990s type of 3D render. Right, just drop it down to 0. Right, it also reduces render time anyway, and it also reduces the odds of blowing out the scene when if and when you add the lens effect. Right, I personally really like the lens effect. Anyway, because the lens effect, it gives you the vignetting over here and vignetting over here, like that. Right here, vignette, vignette, vignetting, vignetting. So again, specular, drop it down to 0. Base color, give it a color. Diffuse roughness. Again, this right here, right? You do this because of while you are tuning the render, right? Don't just plug in the numbers and just go on autopilot. I did this because for my specific scenario, it helped to prevent blowout when I applied the lens effect, light bloom, right? And that's what I did for the shaders. Super simple. Then, right, I'm gonna hide each of these. I added a sky dome, right? I added a sky dome, which is Arnold Lights Sky Dome. I did not do the physical sky, right? There's reasons why having to do with the shadows, right? I just added a sky dome. That's all I did, right? Sky dome. Sky dome. And the intensity is at 1, exposure is at 0, right? Samples is the shadow samples. I just left that at 1. I could do it to 2, but whatever. Everything else is the same. Then I added the rim light. I named it, right? Please name your scene. Right? Name everything nice. This is your final project, so just do what needs to be done and make it nice, make it presentable, make it more and more professional quality in terms of at least organization and naming. Because I mean, this is your final project. Apply everything that you've learned and that I said to do. So this is the rim light. I made the rim light large, right? And I made it tilted down. This is important that I made it tilted down. Because this, when I tilted it down like that and made it large and it's encompassing, right? You see this, there's this much space. There's like this much space, right? And it's freaking huge. That alone helps to create this halo effect on the ground. See this right here? It helps to create that halo effect. And it helps to add overhead rim lighting here, 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 and here. That's what it does. As well as some here. Overhead rim lighting here, like that. See over here like that. Well, mostly here on the outer edges. And more importantly, for the halo lighting effect, lighting of the floor, okay? And then what I did for this is intensity is at 1, right? I gave it a color, a cooler color. I gave it a cooler color because everything else is warm, like the orange background is warm. So to counter that and to give it more pop, I added that cooler color, which you can see here. You can see here, 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 here. It gives it that nice contrast and pop in relation to the warm orange-ish colored background. I gave the exposure to 10, but no more than 10. Anything more than 10, it will guarantee blow out the floor, right? And also blow out the rim lighting in relation to the lens effect. And even if I were to turn off the lens effect, it would get pretty bright, anything more than 10. But then again, you could experiment, right? Try it out yourself. Use the IPR render interactive. Anyway, so exposure at 10, intensity at 1. Then there's the roundness at 1, soft edge at 1. For sure, soft edge. Roundness, it can be hit or miss in terms of what it does, how it affects the render, but for sure I turned up the soft edge. If I remember correctly, the soft edge allows for the, I think the soft edge is around here, I think, right? It's either that or the reflections are going to be soft edged. I don't know. All I know is that it makes it look good. That's all I know, right? When you compare A and B, before and after snapshot renders, right? Just do it. Roundness, I forgot if it did anything. I just turned it on. Also transmission, I set that to 1. I don't think it did anything for this scene. Transmission usually has to do with glass materials, right? And maybe metal materials with high reflectivity. But I just turned that to 1. It may or may not have an influence in this scene though. And you can always figure it out, find out by doing renders before and after, turning on and off the transmission. Default is 0. Alright, then I added the overhead light. This guy right here. Again, as you can see, it is a good size. It's not as big as the angled down rim light, right? It's smaller. I mean, yeah, not smaller, but less, not as long. Reason why, again, there's a reason why. It also adds to the floor, the halo lighting, right? It kind of stops here and kind of stops here-ish. Yeah. And it gives it the, it also adds to the rim lighting because of here and here and here. Again, this was all done sequentially. I add one light, I do a test render, I save it, right? I added this, I did a test render, I save the snapshot, then I add this, I do another test render, I save it, and then I add this, I do another test render, and I save it. Right, everything that I taught before. And this one, same thing, this overhead light, I name it, right? Intensity at 1, exposure at 11. This one's intensity at 1, exposure at 10. Huh, this one's at 11. I thought it would blow out the scene, but it didn't. That's interesting. Well, I do remember this one. This one, it did blow out the scene. So strange. But this one, it didn't. At least that's what I remember. Anyhow, you do have to do test renders, right? Save it, save before and after. You can do the IPR render, right? For this scene, it did not mess with it did not crash the scene or anything like that when I did IPR render, so it's fine. Again, for the overhead, I had roundness to 1, soft edge to 1, right? Samples to 2. This is the shadow quality. It may or may not matter. I just put it to 2. Transmission, I put it to 1, because it's more for glass, but I turned it on, maybe thinking that it would give more kick to the highlights. It did not increase render times, and I don't remember if it made a difference. I'm not sure. All I know is that it did not hurt the render and it did not increase the render times. So that was that one. Then I added this, right? Area light left, right? If I look from the top down, panels, orthographic, top, right? I angled it like that, going like that. Again, this one's 1, this is 13. I guess I did increase it more. I must have done something extra to not blow out the scene, because this was starting to blow out. I'll remember what it was when I go further along in this video. Alright, so 1 and 13, right? Again, intensity at 1, exposure at 13. Do not increase this and also increase this. There are students that still do this. Do not do this. Just don't do it. Don't give yourself more headache. Like, it's not because I'm on a power trip, but because you're gonna give yourself more headache and add more variables. Like I specifically said, do not increase this, only increase this, right? Even when, not if, but when I check your final files and this is both jacked up, I will drop points. It's because it's just not right. Anyway, soft edge at 1, roundness at 1, transmission at 1, samples at 2. And I gave the same color as this, same color as this, to give that nice cool color wrapping around the letters. Right, that's how you get that effect right here. A little contrast and lighting and colors. And rim lighting, you know, to wrap around it. This guy. Then there's the right side, which again, I named it, right? The right side, 1 and 13. Same values as this. I keep this and this the same values, so the strength of the highlights, right, are equal, and not one is more stronger than the other. While this is a little bit weaker, so it's not overwhelming everything. I think that's the reason why I did that too. And this, again, just a little bit more stronger, top down, to get that overhead rim lighting, a little bit more kick, while not blowing out the lens effect bloom, light bloom. Anyway, so again, 1, 13, teal colored, right? Depending on, everything depends on what colors you choose. So again, do not just go in and just pump in these colors, right? It all depends on what color scheme you want to go for. 1, 13, roundness at 1, soft edge at 1, samples to 2, this is shallow quality, transmission at 1. And then, oh, here's my render shot, animated render cam. I turn this on and this, that way you can kind of see what areas gets grayed out, right? But let me go back to panels perspective. Alright, so that's the basic lighting setup. And when I pull up my auto render view, right, I turn on IPR render. This little Wi-Fi signal looking thing will also turn on when I press play, right? And there's that too. I run IPR or just hit play. Make sure this is on. Make sure you choose your render cam, right? And then finally in here, render settings. Okay, so that's 24 minutes. I'll be done in less than 30 minutes, I hope. Alright, again, review time, right? Same thing from the turntable animation, same thing from the ball animations, right? So, Arnold renderer, okay, comment tab, file name prefix, I named it this, right? You can see here. This is file name, but then this is beginning and this is end. Even though it says 2, right? I just take it as beginning, start. 2 for me, I just interpret as end, beginning and end. Right? I don't know why they named it like this, but I just interpret, I just read it that way. Beginning at frame 15, end at frame 50. In my situation, it begins at frame 15 because it drops from the sky. Because I don't want to do negative numbers and some other reasons. And then image format, set it to TIFF, right? Set it to TIFF. Right here, this one right here. Name dot number dot extension, right? Make sure to follow this. If you don't follow this, you're gonna just wreck your render sequence. Please follow this, right? And again, please follow TIFF. There's a difference between TIFF and PNG, right? Just go with the TIFF. There's other reasons why. Just stick to TIFF. All right, start frame 15, end frame 50. Again, for my particular situation, it starts at 15, ends at 50. Renderable camera, right? Then image size HD 1080, right? For full HD, 1920 by 1080. The next tab, sampling. You could make it to 10, right? I just made it 12 because I like my renders. I want it to be nice and crisp. But you could do yours ranging between 8 and 10. 8 and 10. Yeah. With 8 and 10, let me check something. 1 second. So, with my render at 12 samples, right, quality of the render, it increased it so that each render is about 30 seconds. Each render is about 30 seconds, give or take. It's between, it's between 30 seconds or so, right, for each minute. Each minute is about either one, I don't know, it's about 30 seconds. If you drop it down to 8 or 10, it should be maybe 20 seconds instead of 30. This is assuming you render it on the school computers, right? Anyhow, so you could just make it like 8 or between 8 and 10. If you're really in a tight bind, you could do it just 8. 10 if you want to make it as crisp and nice as possible. Alright, then is your array depth. I set to 4 and 4. 4 and 4, it gives it that 4 bounces for the diffuse, 4 bounces for specular, the light bounces for that indirect illumination. So that let me you know, all the little cracks area, like here, right, and here, like underneath here, and like here, that's what it does. The indirect illumination, it illuminates it. It helps to give it that pop too, in contrast to the warm background, orange colored. Yeah. So 4 and 4. And then motion blur, I turned it on, enable, and the length default is 0.5, 0.5. I dropped it down to 0.35. What that does is that the motion blur is just slightly more weaker, not as obvious. So this right here is at 0.35. You see this motion blur? If I have at 0.5, the blur is going to be fatter of a blur at 0.5, like this much more. You see this much, but double that right around here. So it has just enough, but not overkill. And that's what that is, 0.35. for the motion blur. Enable it and do that. If you have massive camera cuts, right, moving camera cuts, it will do some, the motion blur will do some, I don't know, potential issues, right? But if you have just one camera, no issues with the motion blur. Yeah. Well, hard to say. No, if you have moving cameras, you can make some, the moving camera, you know, it will add motion blur to the moving camera, right? And then it could, some students said that it gave some visual weird issues, right? But then for me, when I did the bouncing ball, it never gave me issues because all I had was static camera shots, one from one to the next. I did not have moving cameras transitioning. Just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. You'll be fine, right? Yeah. Then there's my imagers. Here's the denoiser. This is default. Should be there anyway. Then there's a lens effect, right? The lens effect is where I get the halo, not the halo, but the vignetting like this, vignetting like that, right? The lens effect is where I also have this little glint right here. And I have a bit of a glint right here, right? Barely noticeable, but it is there and here. On top of the rim lighting effect anyway. Yeah. So when I select the lens effect, render settings, it's all here. So this is the values I have, right? Fair chance this will work for you, fair chance. I have the vignetting at 3.5. I have this light bloom, lens effect light bloom, strength at 1. I have my radius at 5. That's the radius of the bloom effect right here. That's at 5. And the kick on the brightest spot is threshold 1.35. Higher the number makes it a less of a bloom kick. The bloom kick, right, is weaker when you make the threshold value higher. If you make the threshold value lower, it will exponentially brighten the lens effect. Anyhow, this is the value I have, 1.35, right? Radius at 5, strength at 1, vignetting at 0.35. Yeah, and this is all based on the assumption that your shaders are under control, 0.7 and 0.35. This is also under the assumption that your lights, right, if you have white colored light, right, and not colored light, if you have white colored light, the odds of you blowing out the scene from the lens effect goes up a lot. Alright, that's 33 minutes, man. Then there's the color correct. This part was fun, right? There's the main one. I just gave a small kick on the contrast to get more contrast and pop. This is the overall color correct for the contrast. Shadows, I left it alone. Midtones, right? The midtone values of the render color overall. I did some subtle little changes. Saturation, I pumped it up just a little. Contrast, I also pumped it up just a little. Gamma, I left it alone. These I left it alone, the midtones. Highlights, right, I left it alone. And that's it. Shadows, I left it alone. Right, so this is what I did. So I highly recommend doing this, using this, is very similar to Photoshop. Very similar. Like you'll know, because the render view is real time. The renders. Where the hell is it? Right here. When you do the render and you apply, make these subtle changes, it'll show in real time, and you can save a snapshot, and then that will, you can compare before and after as well. So that's what that is. Then there's a finally exposure. I increased it only up to 0.8, 0.08. Anything small decimal number increments, it gives a big boost in terms of overall brightness, right? You feel it rather than, you feel it and you see it, right? So I just did that, 0.08. You have to go in and tune it for your scene, right? Don't just pump in the numbers I gave, except for the lens effect. This one, if you do this, chances are it'll work out okay. Chances are, depending on the colors you choose, right? If you choose anything other than white, this will most likely work out. But, you know, disclaimer, you do have to tune it and experiment. The whole point is to experiment and to kind of work with it, so that you can end up getting results like this, where it's just, you know, it's pretty, it's very acceptable, presentable, you know. Yeah. And I think, oh, also under system tab, set to GPU. Again, this is all with the assumption that you're rendering at school. System, GPU, manual device selection, turn it on, highlight this, right? If you have two graphics cards, highlight both. Lastly, down here, the running man and the gearbox, right? Make sure, because it'll take you directly to the time slider, 24 frames per second. Playback speed, 24 frames per second. Yeah. And then that's pretty much ready. Make sure that I do not want to see, right? I do not want to see duplicates of assets, right? And they're grouped. I do not want to see copy and paste, right? Stuff going on, because again, it makes my job harder, right? I get confused if there's duplicates and the scene's not cleaned up. It gives me a reason to just start to shave off a good amount of percentage points, because I've talked about it, to keep it clean and nice. And down here, you know, I have things named, you know, down here, color coded, controllers, bones mesh, controllers, bones mesh, controllers, bones mesh, colored, right? Everything is set up and nice. And then finally, for the renders, you set to rendering menu. You go to render sequence, option box, choose that, right? Your render cam, and then you choose the folder, right? Depending on, well, I have my outfit project folder hierarchy, right here, amongst other projects, and then it will typically save it to your images folder, images, right? I made a new folder, I clicked on that, I named it this, and then you hit select, and then you hit render sequence and close. But before you do that, you close out this window just in case. Render sequence and close, and I'll go through the process again. So that's what I did to get this end result, right? If you follow the directions, right, and don't skip, don't rush, you come very close to this, right? Presentable lighting solution, right? And again, a lot of that light where I staged it like this. You see this right here? This nice halo effect. And this nice fall off right here. And this nice saturated background color. This, again, from everything that I discussed. Even down to this wash shader, right? Diffuse roughness, I dropped it. And that made the background more of a muted and saturated color and preventing blowouts. And then how I position the lights, right? If you look at the channel box, the values, right? Clean, only that is rotated. This one also whole numbers and clean. This one again, same thing but reversed. Negative, negative versus, well, this is negative but this is positive. And the size is the same too. And this one is clean, negative, slight tilt on the X, no tilt on the Y and the Z. And it helps to just make everything balanced. This specific setup, right here, see, even the height of it, see how far above it is above the ground, right? In relation to the ground and in relation to the size of the letters. I put it above the ground because it'll prevent it causing a sharp line on the floor. When the area lights emit the light, it's to prevent that sharp line that the light casts. And instead you have a nice soft gradation. This, if you just follow this, I'm going to rotate it slowly. I'm going to hide my controllers, animation controllers for now. Right? We'll rotate slowly. If you follow this setup, right, you have a nice lighting stage, just like in a Broadway play or whatever. See? Especially above it like that. Especially it's angled down like that. Right, and this is overhead side. I don't do a frontal camera. I don't do a frontal light. Right, I don't do a frontal because, you know, it can help. It can make it look flat and take away some of the tone values. Yeah, I do not recommend making a directional light. I do not recommend that. I do not recommend making a physical sky. I do not recommend. Right? There's reasons why for this particular thing. Especially, do not have the letters. Like if you're gonna move the letters from behind and front, basically you don't want it to crash through the letters. Crash through the area lights. Go through the area lights, because if you do, it's going to influence the shading. If you have your composition set up, and then for whatever reason, if the letters, when they reveal onto the stage or when they animate, if they animate going through the lights, right, it will have an effect on the shaders. So beware of that. Yeah. And that's it. So again, this whole project, I added this extra tutorial just now just to try to help you guys out. You know, usually I could just say, hey, just look through my other video tutorials for rendering and stuff and do that, but you know, I just figured why not help you guys out and to review and stuff using a new video. And it's for the most part very rudimentary. but it freaking works. It will work. As you can see here, it will work and it will look nice with no strange artifacts or technical hiccups. I think that's it. That's pretty much everything I covered that needs to be covered, and potential hiccups too. Yeah. Alright, that's it. Bye.